Okay, so this video is me explaining what happens when you have Mercury in the 7th house in your birth chart. So what is the 7th house? The 7th house represents relationships, your spouse, person you'll marry, one-on-one intimate close interactions with people. And that's essentially what the 7th house is in a nutshell. A house of intimate, personal, one-on-one relationships. It's originally ruled by Venus and originally ruled by Libra. What is Mercury? Mercury represents youthfulness because, I don't know, Mercury's associated with youth. So, and it rules the signs Virgo and Gemini. So if you got a Virgo ascendant, Gemini ascendant, or maybe Mercury sitting in the ascendant, and you might have a very young, youthful looking appearance. Mercury represents communication, but mainly written communication. It represents siblings, specifically younger siblings, because it rules the 3rd house of siblings. But because I just told you Mercury mainly is associated with youth, it specifically represents younger siblings, and the 11th house represents older siblings. Mercury represents just our logical, calculative, practical intelligence. Mercury represents how do we use our intelligence, our knowledge to solve and overcome problems and obstacles. Mercury is a very fast-moving planet. So it represents quick thinking and quick intelligence, and that's essentially what Mercury is. So what happens when you put Mercury in the 7th house in your birth chart? What happens when they come together? Well, planets in the 7th house can represent, sometimes they might represent you, but oftentimes they can represent traits that your spouse might, portray and illustrate. So Mercury in the 7th house, you might attract or date and marry or settle down with a very youthful partner. You might marry someone who looks very youthful and young. You might be in a serious long-term relationship with someone who's very youthful and young. Your partner could be very intelligent, very communicative. But for you would be someone who would want to maybe use your intelligence to solve your partner's problems, because Mercury naturally rules the 3rd house of communication and the 6th house of everyday routine things and everyday problems. So Mercury is bringing the energy of those 2 houses into the 7th house. So Mercury would naturally probably want to be very communicative with their partner. They would want to learn from their partner. They would want to have mentally stimulating conversations and interactions with their spouse. And also at the same time, Mercury will probably want to pry and be curious and learn about the spouses and partners' problems, and maybe try to use their own intelligence to try to resolve those problems. Maybe someone with Mercury in the 7th house, they could be a very skilled businessman, a very skilled communicator when it comes to dealing with people on an intimate one-on-one basis. They might be also sort of maybe very flirtatious, but I would definitely say clever. You would see flirtatiousness and all that depending on the sign and the house that Mercury rules in your own personal birth chart. But, Mercury is intelligence. So he's bringing his intelligence into one-on-one partnerships, into one-on-one business meetings and dealings and stuff. So if you are maybe sitting with your boss or whatever and you're trying to negotiate and discuss you getting a raise, that's sort of like a one-on-one 7th house like meeting and environment. And if you got Mercury sitting in the 7th house, you would likely be using your mercurial intelligence to try to get the upper hand in that meeting to get what you want. You would use the 3rd house significations of Mercury and be very skilled at communicating in order to achieve the desired results that you are looking for with Mercury in the 7th house. And then let's say that maybe Mercury is maybe the 5th lord or the 8th lord, or it's in this very flirtatious sign or nakshatra, which you'll learn about when I do explain what nakshatras are. If Mercury is in, stuff like that, Mercury might become very flirtatious. So therefore we might see somebody who will probably be very skilled with their tongue and their way of talking. They might be very skilled and slick with sweet talking and charming and having a gift of gab, whether it's with their romantic partners or whether it's with business associates or close friends. They could use that skillful, artful way of communication to gain the upper hand in what they're looking for out of somebody. Some of Mercury in the 7th house, naturally Mercury is looking at the ascendant. So for you being in a marriage, or for you being in maybe a serious long-term committed relationship, your partner, your spouse, they'll sort of boost your intelligence. You will date somebody who will make you feel smarter. You'll date somebody who will sharpen your mind, because the Mercury is sitting in the 7th house. And for the most part, planets sitting in the 7th house, they represent your spouse. They'll show how they will alter and affect things in relation to your spouse, unless your Mercury is like your ascendant lord or something. So Mercury looking at the ascendant, we see that your spouse would sort of affect your life, because the ascendant and planets aspect in the ascendant, planets sitting in the ascendant, will affect you, your body, and your whole life. So your spouse, like I said, they will end up making you a very skillful communicator, or a great problem solver, or someone who's way more organized and structured with how they utilize their intelligence in your everyday way of living. And these are just very generic explanations of what could possibly happen with Mercury in the 7th house, because of course we would have to see your own chart. We would have to see what sign Mercury is in. We would have to see what houses Mercury rules, because once you see what houses Mercury rules, we will be able to more specifically see what energy Mercury is bringing when it comes into the 7th house. But that's essentially it. Make sure I didn't miss nothing. Like I said, intellectual partner, very communicative partner, potentially flirtatious partner, a youthful looking partner, a partner who uses their intelligence to gain the upper hand in relationships and intimate one-on-one business dealings. And they just be a very skillful trader, a very skillful businessman, a very skillful person when it comes to dealing with the people. They'll use their intelligence for that type of stuff. And that's all I have to say when it comes to what happens when you have Mercury sitting in the 7th house in your birth chart. I hope this resonated for you and gave you great insight and clarity on what to expect if you have Mercury sitting in the 7th house in your chart. And thank you for watching.